I believed in fairy tales. Every morning, I woke up wrapped in a love so flawless it felt divine, until one fateful afternoon when I discovered the secret bank account and the hidden divorce papers. In those first 100 seconds, my world exploded into chaos. The whispers of betrayal, the cold evidence of financial deceit, and the finality of legal signatures I never authorized. My perfect marriage, the life I thought was built on trust and shared dreams, crumbled before my eyes. Every heartbeat pounded like a warning. This was no mistake. My heart, once secure in love, was now gripped by a terror I had never known. For 15 years, I had lived what I believed was an ideal marriage with Daniel. We shared everything, or so I thought. We built our lives together, celebrating anniversaries with lavish surprises, planning vacations to far-off destinations, and supporting each other through every obstacle. Daniel was my rock, my confidant, the man I trusted with every secret and every hope for our future. Our friends admired us, our family celebrated our union, and I proudly wore the label married as if it were proof of an unassailable bond. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday that began like any other, my life took a sudden, unimaginable turn. I had been sorting through some old files in our home office, documents I assumed were mundane records of our finances and shared expenses, when a plain envelope caught my eye. It wasn't addressed to me, yet the handwriting on it was unmistakably Daniel's. With a growing sense of unease, I tore it open and discovered a bank statement from an account I'd never heard of. The numbers were staggering, a sum far exceeding anything we had ever discussed or planned for. My hands trembled as I scanned the statement. The account was active, and the transactions bore no trace of our joint ventures or savings plans. At first, I thought it might be a new investment Daniel had been too busy to mention, perhaps a secret surprise for our upcoming anniversary. But curiosity soon turned into dread when, tucked behind the statement in the same envelope, I found another set of papers. These were legal documents, a stack of divorce papers, meticulously prepared, bearing the signature of a lawyer I didn't recognize. It was as if my worst nightmare had been meticulously documented and hidden in plain sight, waiting for me to uncover the truth. In that moment, time seemed to slow. I sat down at the oak desk in our office, the familiar scent of paper and ink now tainted by a bitter metallic taste of betrayal. My mind raced with questions. Had Daniel been hiding this secret life from me all along? Who was the beneficiary of this mysterious bank account? And most heartbreakingly, had he already decided that our marriage was over? The shock was overwhelming. I reread the documents, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. Every word, every line of legal jargon confirmed the unthinkable. My husband had been planning our separation without my knowledge. The divorce papers were dated for the near future, and the bank statement hinted at funds that could only belong to someone planning a new beginning, one without me. My thoughts swirled in a vortex of disbelief and sorrow. The marriage I had cherished, the perfect life I had imagined, was nothing more than an illusion. I spent the rest of that day in a haze. The house that had once been our sanctuary now felt like a maze of secrets. I moved from room to room, searching for clues that might explain the betrayal. I rifled through drawers, examined old emails on our shared computer, and even checked our safe for any other hidden documents. Every corner of our home whispered a painful reminder of what I had lost, yet none of it offered solace or answers, only more questions and a deepening sense of isolation. That evening, as dusk settled over the city and the soft glow of streetlights filtered through our living room window, I made a decision. I would confront Daniel, even though my heart pounded with trepidation at the thought. I rehearsed my questions over and over in the quiet of our once happy home. How could you? Why would you do this to us? What did I not see? I wondered if I had been blind to subtle signs, if I had misinterpreted his late-night phone calls or his sudden absences. Every memory, every shared secret, now seemed tainted by deceit. I waited for him in our living room, the envelope and divorce papers clutched tightly in my hand. When Daniel finally returned that night, he wore an expression of surprise that quickly morphed into discomfort as I presented him with the evidence. The confrontation was raw and agonizing. I demanded answers in a voice that quavered between fury and heartbreak. For a long, excruciating moment he said nothing. His eyes, once filled with warmth and familiarity, were now clouded with guilt and resignation. Why? I repeated, each word a blow to my already shattered heart. Why did you hide this from me? Daniel's silence was unbearable, and finally, in a whisper that barely reached my ears, he muttered, "I thought you'd be better off without knowing." That answer, as feeble as it was, sent a fresh wave of anguish crashing over me. I felt betrayed not only by the act itself but by the cold indifference with which he had chosen to dismiss our years of shared love and trust. The perfect marriage I had believed in had been a facade, one that concealed secrets so dark and painful that they now redefined everything I once held dear. The hours that followed were a blur of shattered dreams and tear-stained regrets. I found myself unable to sleep, my mind replaying the moment I discovered the bank statement and divorce papers. I wandered through the silent halls of our home, each step echoing with the memory of happier times. Dinners filled with laughter, whispered conversations in the dark, the tender embrace of shared hopes. Now, every memory felt like a betrayal, a reminder of the life I thought I had, only to realize that it was built on lies. In the midst of that unbearable pain, I began to question everything. How had I failed to see the signs? Was our love so blind that I had ignored the subtle hints of his growing distance? The self-doubt was as relentless as the tears that blurred my vision. I sought refuge in my journal, pouring out my anguish in a stream of consciousness that was raw, unfiltered, and brutally honest. Every line I wrote was a desperate plea for understanding, a testament to the depth of my hurt and the magnitude of the betrayal I had endured. That night, as I finally sank into an uneasy sleep, my dreams were haunted by images of a life I once believed was perfect. I saw Daniel's smiling face slowly contort into one of cruelty, heard his laughter morph into a mocking sneer, and felt the crushing weight of loneliness as the secret bank account and divorce papers loomed like specters over my future. In the early morning darkness, I awoke with a profound sense of loss, the evidence of his deception still clutched in my hand, a tangible reminder that nothing would ever be the same. Now, as I sit alone in the quiet aftermath of that devastating revelation, I am forced to confront the bitter truth. The life I thought I knew was a carefully constructed illusion, and the perfect marriage I had cherished was nothing more than a mirage in a desert of lies. I realize that the journey ahead will be long and fraught with heartbreak, as I attempt to rebuild my identity from the ruins of betrayal. Yet even in this profound darkness, a tiny spark of determination flickers within me, the resolve to uncover the truth, to understand where I went wrong and ultimately to forge a path toward healing. I remember the day she came back into my life as vividly as if it were yesterday. It was a cold, overcast afternoon when a soft knock at my door stirred me from a restless sleep. My heart pounded in my chest as I hesitantly opened the door to find her standing there, drenched not only by the relentless drizzle outside but by tears that glistened with regret. Her eyes, once so full of mischief and indifference, were now shadowed by a sorrow that nearly broke me anew. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling with desperation, "I need you to forgive me. For months after I discovered the secret bank account and the hidden divorce papers, I drifted in a fog of disbelief and aching loneliness. I had buried myself in the routine of mourning a marriage I thought was perfect, replaying every moment and conversation in search of the signs I had missed. Every creak in our empty house reminded me of happier days, every familiar scent on the worn couch screamed of a past that had now become a painful illusion. I spent countless hours alone in my dimly lit apartment, journaling my sorrow and trying to piece together the fragments of my shattered trust. I questioned every smile, every word of affection from the man I once believed loved me unconditionally. In that barren emotional landscape, I built walls, thick and impenetrable, to shield my heart from further injury. But now, standing before me in that moment of raw vulnerability, she was offering something I never thought possible, an earnest plea for forgiveness. Her presence, so tentative and contrite, forced me to confront the tumult of emotions I had so long tried to suppress. I stepped aside to let her in, and together we sat in the living room that once buzzed with the music of our shared life. The soft hum of the heater and the muted light of the late afternoon sun now bore witness to a conversation that would determine the course of my future. At first, the silence between us was heavy with unspoken memories. I struggled to gather the words, my throat tight with both grief and anger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she began to speak. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice cracking as she searched my face for some sign of mercy. "I was lost and I made a terrible mistake when you were so vulnerable. I thought I could fill the void, escape the pain, and start over without realizing I was destroying everything we had." Each syllable was laced with regret, each pause a confession of the guilt that had haunted her since that fateful betrayal. Her words ripped open old wounds. I recalled the bitter shock of discovering that while I lay in the hospital, weak, injured, and dependent on the kindness of strangers, she had found solace in the arms of another. I remembered the gut-wrenching moment I learned of the secret bank account and the divorce papers, evidence of a life being unraveled behind my back. That discovery had left me feeling like an imposter in my own marriage, my trust stolen and my identity questioned. The hurt was immense. It was as if every promise we had ever made was reduced to ash. And yet, here she was, standing before me, asking for forgiveness as if that could somehow stitch together the irreparable tear in my soul. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to tell her that forgiveness was a luxury I wasn't sure I could ever afford. But even as anger surged within me, I felt an unexpected, almost imperceptible stirring. A small voice reminding me that holding on to the past was slowly poisoning my future. I realized that while her betrayal had left deep scars, clinging to relentless bitterness would only ensure that I remained imprisoned by the pain. That realization did not come easily. I spent many sleepless nights wrestling with conflicting emotions, waves of rage crashing against fragile moments of introspection. I questioned whether I had ever truly known her, whether I had been naive enough to ignore the signs. I agonized over the thought that perhaps the idealized version of our marriage was nothing more than a mirage, a construct built on illusions that could shatter in an instant. The bitterness of her infidelity and the legal documents that confirmed her secret life were tangible proofs of a deception I could neither unsee nor unfeel. In the weeks following her return, I embarked on a journey to understand what forgiveness meant for me. I began attending therapy sessions with Dr. Ramirez, a kind and patient counselor who guided me through the labyrinth of my shattered emotions. In one particularly profound session, she asked, "Do you think forgiveness is about forgetting what happened, or is it about freeing yourself from its hold?" That question reverberated in my mind for days. I realized that forgiveness wasn't a gift I gave to her, it was a release I owed myself, a way to reclaim my life from the bitterness that had taken root in my heart. I started small. I allowed myself to write letters that I never sent, letters in which I detailed every ounce of my pain, every betrayal, every broken promise. Through these writings, I began to see that my story was not defined solely by her actions. I rediscovered passions and interests that had been buried under the weight of our shared past. I returned to my daily walks at dawn, where the crisp morning air reminded me that every day was a new beginning. I even took up painting again, splashing vibrant colors onto canvases that reflected both my suffering and my slowly reawakening hope. Each brushstroke, each run along a quiet street, was a step toward reclaiming the parts of me I had long thought lost. Throughout this process, I remained guarded in my interactions with her. Our meetings were brief and carefully measured, moments where she would express her remorse and I would listen, not out of a desire to rekindle what was lost, but to understand the depths of her regret. There were times when I wanted to lash out, when every fiber of my being screamed that she had irrevocably shattered the trust between us. But as I listened to her halting apologies and saw the raw pain in her eyes, I began to wonder if she too was a victim of circumstances, a person who had allowed fear and loneliness to drive her to make choices she now deeply regretted. One evening we met at a small cafe that overlooked a busy city square. The clamor of voices and the clinking of cups formed a backdrop to our quiet conversation. I asked her about the moments that led to her betrayal, the nights when I was unconscious from pain, the loneliness that she claimed had overwhelmed her. She spoke softly, her voice laced with regret, confessing that the absence of my presence had left a void she tried desperately to fill with superficial attention and fleeting affection. "I felt abandoned even when you were fighting for your life," she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I didn't realize that my actions would break you so completely. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for everything." In that moment, I understood that forgiveness, if it were ever to be granted, would be a slow process. I couldn't simply erase the memories of betrayal or the pain that had defined my recent past. Instead, I had to learn to live with them, to let them coexist with the parts of me that still believed in the possibility of love and renewal. I told her, "I'm not ready to say I forgive you completely, but I'm willing to work on it, for my sake, for our shared history." My words, though measured and cautious, carried the weight of a decision to no longer let her betrayal imprison my future. Over the next several months, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into my work and discovered a sense of purpose in professional achievements that I had long neglected. I spent evenings with friends who reminded me that I was valued, not for the role I played in someone else's narrative, but for the person I was becoming. I even joined a support group for people who had experienced betrayal, where I met others who had navigated similar storms. Their stories, though diverse, shared a common theme of resilience, a testament to the fact that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and compassion. Slowly, I began to feel the heavy chains of resentment loosen. I realized that holding on to anger was like clutching a burning coal, inflicting endless pain upon myself. The decision to forgive, then, was not about absolving her of responsibility, It was about liberating myself from the tyranny of my own hurt. In quiet moments as I sat by my window watching the world go by, I would reflect on the journey I had taken. I recognized that forgiveness was not a single act but a series of small choices made every day. A choice to smile at a stranger, to savor the taste of my morning coffee, to acknowledge that while the past could not be changed, the future was mine to shape. One particularly memorable afternoon, I found myself wandering through an art gallery. The exhibit featured works by local artists who had transformed their personal tragedies into breathtaking masterpieces. I stood transfixed before a painting that depicted a stormy seascape, dark clouds swirling above tumultuous waves, yet in the distance, a solitary beam of sunlight broke through the storm. It struck me as a perfect metaphor for my own journey, a reminder that even in the midst of chaos and sorrow, there exists the possibility of hope and renewal. In that moment, I resolved to let go of the bitterness that had once held me captive, to step into the light of a future that was unburdened by the weight of betrayal. As I continued to rebuild, I began to explore the possibility of new connections, of opening my heart to love again without fear. I met Daniel, a gentle soul with quiet humor and a compassionate nature, through mutual friends. Our conversations were unhurried and honest, built on mutual respect and shared experiences of loss and healing. With him, I learned that intimacy need not be tainted by the ghosts of the past. Daniel never asked about my history in probing detail. Instead, he accepted me as I was, scars and all, and encouraged me to be unapologetically myself. Slowly, I allowed my heart to flutter with cautious optimism, realizing that while the betrayal had scarred me, it did not render me unworthy of genuine affection. Now, as I sit here on the balcony of my modest new apartment, my sanctuary rebuilt with my own two hands, I feel a gentle peace that was once unimaginable. The memories of her betrayal still visit me in quiet moments, like shadows that recede when the sun rises. I have learned that forgiveness is a journey of self-discovery, a continuous process of letting go and choosing to move forward. I no longer carry the bitter laughter of the past as a burden but as a lesson in the fragility of trust and the resilience of the human spirit. I know now that the scars left by betrayal will always be a part of me, but they do not define me. Instead, they remind me of the strength I discovered in the midst of darkness, the courage I summoned when faced with an unfathomable loss, and the hope that guided me toward rebuilding a life that is authentically mine. My wife's plea for forgiveness, though it reopened wounds I thought had begun to heal, became the turning point that allowed me to finally take control of my narrative. I chose to forgive not out of weakness or concession, but as a bold declaration that I refused to be imprisoned by the past. Today, I look forward with cautious optimism. Every day is a step toward a future where trust is rebuilt slowly, where love is nurtured carefully, and where the pain of yesterday is transformed into the wisdom of tomorrow. I continue to write, to paint, to run, and to embrace the simple joys of life. In each of these acts, I find the strength to let go of what was and to welcome what can be. I am no longer the person who once wept over broken promises. I am a survivor who has found beauty in imperfection, grace in forgiveness, and a future that is mine to create. This is my truth, a journey marked by heartbreak, resilience, and ultimately redemption. I carry the memories of betrayal as quiet echoes of the past, but I step into each new day with the certainty that I am more than the sum of my wounds. I have learned that even when love seems irrevocably broken, there is always a path to healing, a long, winding road that leads from despair to the promise of renewal. As I close this chapter and look to the horizon, I do so with a heart that is bruised but not broken, a spirit that is scarred yet unyielding, and an unwavering belief that every ending is the seed of a new beginning. The journey continues, and with each sunrise I choose to live fully, to forgive deeply, and to embrace the hope that tomorrow holds. I am not defined by the betrayal of my past but by the strength I found in rising above it.